Should be on. Just speak into it. Speak into it.
Good evening, Democrats. Let's clap for Democrats. Okay, so I've taken my mask off, and I've told our speaker that when he starts speaking, it's okay to take his mask off too. And you all can do what you think best, but COVID's not over, so no, I'm being extra careful. So I'm Vicki Shea. I'm the chair of the Farrington Democratic Club. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. First of all, please turn off your cell phones. And during the question and answer period, please wait for the microphone. We have someone designated to bring the microphone around. And we always have someone who says, oh, I don't need it. My voice is loud enough. And I'm here to tell you it isn't. No matter who it is, you know, at our age, we have hearing problems. So it's really a lot better to wait for the microphone, please. And for those of you at home, you can type your questions into the chat box. And we have someone monitoring the chat box also. So we'll take turns with who gets to speak. And the other thing is, I just want to encourage people who want to join or renew their membership, but haven't yet done so. These folks at the waving from the back of the table would be glad to take your money and put you on our mailing list for our emails and other things. And it's also, you can join from our website, which is farringtondems.org. So you have found many colorful handouts on your seats, those of you who are in the gathering place. On one of them is the early voting schedule for Chatham County. You can vote at any one of the polling locations that is listed there. It's on the back of the map. And I just want to tell people that some of us, various groups, have worked very hard to advocate to have Sunday afternoon voting in Chatham County, which was has been an issue and difficult to achieve. So if it's all the same to you, if you could vote on one of the Sundays, that would be really helpful in showing that that's popular and is of interest to Chatham people. Because if we don't have a good turnout, as undefined what a good turnout is, but if we don't have it, then we're unlikely to have it in the future. So there are 2 Sundays, there are 2 weekends between the beginning of early voting and election day. And the 2 Sundays from 12 to 3, all of the polls all of the early voting polls, all 5 of them are open. So if you could go to one of those, and the closest, as you probably know, used to be a little orange building sitting out off of 15501 all by itself. And now it has apartments and Food Lion and trucks and all those kinds of things. But that little orange building is still one of the places that you can vote. And the other one that's closest is the new Ag Center in Pittsburgh, just past the community college. Okay, let's see. Oh, and the other little handout on the little one on your chair is the announcement of our next meeting, which is going to be not the fourth Tuesday, which we usually have. It's going to be on October the 18th because early voting starts on October 20th. And so we're having a rally with all of the local candidates, the county commissioner candidates, the Board of Education, the sheriff. Everybody loves when the sheriff comes, so he's fun, and the North Carolina House and North Carolina Senate. So, and we're going to make that one as fun as a political rally can be, because we've had a lot of serious speakers and things, and it's really time to celebrate and rally and have fun. Okay, so now for the main event. Oh, and let me just mention to the people who are watching on Zoom, I sent as many of you as I could links to the documents that other people have on their chairs. And if anybody didn't get one, if you'll write to the club, we'll send you one. And you also have on your chairs the blue ticket, which is the recommendations of all the Democrats to vote for. It's just a sample ballot. It's on white paper. You can't use that one to, punch in, but it describes all of the Democrats that we really hope that people don't just vote on the first page, but they turn it over on the real ballot and vote on the second page too, because some of these races are crucial for democracy. All of them are good, but some of them are just vital to be able to have a court system, a general assembly, a Congress, and a county commission. So anyway, that's the other thing that you all have. So I'm very happy to present State Senator Ben Clark, who is our Democratic candidate for Congress from our new district. You're going to see when he talks, he's part public servant, part educator, and a tiny part politician in the very best sense. Okay. He's going to introduce all the parts of himself, and I guarantee that you're going to be impressed. You're going to be eager to vote for him, and maybe even eager to make a donation to his campaign, but that's up to you. So enough of me. I'm delighted to introduce Senator Ben Clark.
Thank you, Vicki. Can you all hear me out there? Okay, good. When I was a young man, teen, my father used to have a decal on the back of his car, and it said something to the effect that God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. Now, if I had been able to put the decal on the back of the car, I'd have put, Dad says it, I believe it, and that certainly settles it. And that's the way things were in my house. Now, my father had me when he was a young trooper out of Fort Bragg. As a matter of fact, at the time I was born, he was a maybe 2 or 3 striper. And he ultimately went on to become a helicopter pilot and served 2 tours in Vietnam. Now, near the end of his 20-year career, he had decided that he wanted to go into the ministry. So he began to prepare for that. So upon retirement, he in fact did go into the ministry, and then ultimately served as a pastor in the church for almost 3 decades before retiring. Now, my mother, on the other hand, she was a homemaker, but ultimately she went into the workforce as well to help make ends meet. A young enlisted soldier back in the day didn't make much money, so in order to make things a little easier around the house, she entered the workforce to contribute to the home financially, if you will. But ultimately, at the age of 43, she decided to exit the workforce for a while, and she enrolled in the university, Fayetteville State University, at the age of 43. 4 years later, she received a degree in education and re-entered the workforce as a public school teacher for the Cumberland County school system, where she continued to serve for almost 2 decades before retiring. So you might imagine that in our house, they were quite serious about faith, Christian faith, and quite serious about education. And my parents were committed to the idea that I and my 2 siblings, each of us would go to a university and get a 4-year degree, and they saved up to make that a reality. Now, ultimately, I graduated from high school from the Cumberland County school system, and I enrolled in North Carolina A&T State University, where I would matriculate for 4 years before earning my degree in industrial technology. And I also received a commission to serve in the United States Air Force. So that was going to be a new thing for me, certainly. Okay. So my first career permanent duty assignment after graduating from college was in Fellberg Air Force Station, Germany. Okay. Now, it was not common at that time to send a brand new second lieutenant out of the Air Force to an overseas assignment like that. But I was fortunate to be able to do that. And that particular career, or excuse me, that particular assignment would have a significant impact on the remainder of my Air Force career. So, but I won't get into all that. We could be here for hours talking about that assignment. But ultimately, I would retire after 20 years of service, my last career assignment being at the Defense Intelligence Agency at Bolling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. Now, I might want to add that while at that assignment, I was assigned to a facility that was considered a SCIF, Special Compartmented Information Facility. and I had a top secret SCI clearance. So I know that you just don't think in your head that you're going to unclassify documents and make it so. And I know that you don't just arbitrarily take top secret SCI documents up to your living room or your bedroom and just throw them on the bureau. You don't do that. That's not the way it works, folks. That is some very sensitive material. And just because you have that clearance doesn't mean you see any and everything. You have to be read on the specific items if you have a need to know. So that is very serious business. So this stuff that he's saying is just poppycock. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. But upon retiring from the Air Force, now I returned to North Carolina, and ultimately I found my way to work for a defense contractor out of Fort Bragg, where I've been for the last 19 years. Okay, so. But during that time, I was about maybe 6 years in or so, and I decided that I was going to run for office. Okay, so, well, which office? Because I had never held elected office before, so I considered the landscape and did a little bit of research, and then I decided that I wanted to serve in the North Carolina Senate. So after a few false starts, like 3 of them, eventually I was able to get over the hump on my 4th try. But it just so happens that that 4th try came right after redistricting from the 2010 census activity. You know, after every decennial census, we have to redraw the districts. So I was essentially elected on a new set of districts, which combined my county of birth and where I was raised, Cumberland County, with the county that I was living in at the time, Hope County. And I considered it a district made just for me. But I showed up at the General Assembly after I'd been elected, and I was in for a rude awakening. Because remember, we had that election in 2010 in which a lot of Democrats, for whatever reason, decided to sit home. And then the Republicans swept into the North Carolina General Assembly, flipped the legislature from a Democratic legislature to a Republican legislature. And they considered it a whole new day, and I considered it a nightmare. I mean, because when I arrived there, it was like, wow, what's going on here? Because remember, I didn't arrive until 2013, that January, when I got sworn in. So in the next election cycle, since they had redrawn the districts, they managed to create a supermajority for themselves. So which meant they had the votes within the state Senate and the state House to do any and everything they thought they were big and bad enough to do. And they were bent on doing that. And I learned very quickly that that's what they were planning to do. And so like in January 2013, as I stood there, in the state Senate floor, one of the things they did is they rejected a Sept Medicaid expansion for the state of North Carolina. And to me, that was the most egregious act I believe they perpetrated on the people of the state of North Carolina in my entire time in the North Carolina General Assembly, to reject medical care for 500,000 folks, as well as the economic development that would go along with expanding Medicaid. So, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But since I've been in the Senate, I've been there 10 years now, and we'll talk about my district a little later as well. So during that time, I served on several committees, as you might imagine. The primary committees that I served on were like a Finance Committee, the Redistricting Committee, Commerce, as well as Appropriations Committee. So those were the key committees that I spent a lot of time on during my 10 years in the Senate. But now I stand here before you as the Democratic congressional candidate for Congressional District 9. And since I mentioned that, I want to get this out of the way quickly. You have a sheet of paper with a map on it in the seats. Pull out that map so I can make sure everyone understands what that district looks like, if you don't mind. There's a map of North Carolina. And in the center of the map, you see a yellow patch with a circle around it. Okay. Now that is Congressional District 9 that I am running for. It's not the Congressional District 9 that exists today that Congressman Hudson represents, but he does want to represent you in the new one, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later too. Now, as you see that map, you see that yellow blotch. It has 9 counties in it. And I'll say them in case the people watching via Zoom don't have the map. It has Randolph County, all of Randolph County, all of Chatham County, all of Moore County, all of Lee County, has 3 precincts and a piece of 1, and Harnett County has 2 precincts and a piece of 1 in Richmond County. Then you have all of Scotland County, all of Hope County, in the northwestern portion of Cumberland County. And that is the new Congressional District 9 that I am running for. Now, for those of you who voted in the primary, you did not see me on the primary ballot because I did not take an opponent. Therefore, I was less elected by fiat, I guess you could say, to represent you in the general election. So I did not have an opponent in the primary. Now, this new district is considered to lean Republican. As a matter of fact, some say it is a safe Republican seat. But I want you all to make sure you do what you're supposed to do, and we're going to show Hudson that it's not as safe as he thinks it is, if you don't mind. Okay, so if you look at that map, typically what you see is the Democratic-leaning counties are down in the southern portion and the Sandhills portion of that district. You have the Northwest Cumberland, you have the Hope County, you have the Scotland and the two eastern precincts in Richmond County. And then you have Chatham County, of course, which is a strong Democratic county. And the other counties tend to lean or heavily favor Republicans, such as Randolph County, Moore County, and then Lee County. But despite what you might hear the pollsters saying and the political classes say out there, I believe this is a competitive district. And a part of the reason is if you look in the most southern portion of that map and you see Hope County and northwestern Cumberland County forming the southern base of that district. That is Senate District 21 as it exists today. My entire Senate District 21, with the exception of about one precinct, is a part of that congressional district, and it will likely carry about 30 to 35% of the Democratic votes that will go to the Democratic candidate out of this election. And so with the support of that base, the support of Chatham County and Democrats in other areas of the district, we can win this. We can win this. And so, well, why do I want us to win this as a Democrat? Good question, good question. Okay, now let me tell you something. I'm proud to be a Democrat because it is the Democratic Party that has been the party of and for the people and has consistently improved the American way of life in this country. Let's just look over time. Tell me, which party created Social Security? Democrats. Okay. Which party created Medicare? Democrats. Which party created the GI Bill to help all those soldiers get an education? Democrats. Which party created Medicaid? Democrats. Which party created the Pell Grants to help those in need get college education? Democrats. Which party created the Affordable Care Act to further extend health care to more citizens? Democrats. Which party created the American Rescue Plan to help us navigate our way without the economy falling to shambles during the pandemic? Democrats. And tell me this, I have a lot of seniors in here. Which party was it that just recently passed some legislation that put a $2,000 cap on out-of-pocket Medicare expenses for our Medicare recipients? Democrats. And also capped insulin at $35 a month for those that are diabetic? Democrats. See, and the Democrats do these things because the Democrats are concerned about people. They want to help people. They're not about dividing, attacking, and causing problems for people. So that's why I want to support Democrats. So not just me, of course I want you to support me, but not just me, but all the Democrats on the ballot. I believe you all have been provided with a sample ballot. And it is critically important that we support all of them. I mean, consider the North Carolina General Assembly, where I currently serve, representing Hope and Cumberland County, Senate District 21 for 10 years. But like I said, when I walked in there, they had supermajority, and they are determined to try to get it back. They're determined to try to get, you got to go vote for the Democrats. Because if they get that supermajority back in the Senate and in the House, it's going to be 2013 that I experienced all over again, where they're doing any and everything they believe they're big and bad enough to do and won't have to even worry about a governor's veto. And that would be a crying shame. You don't want to be there. I mean, because unfortunately, because of that Dobbs decision, they've thrown, abortion, the women's right to their own control, their own reproductive futures. They've taken that away and said, well, we'll let the states handle it, and maybe even the federal government could potentially be handled by the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate. But let's just focus on the state for the time being. Having served there in 10 years, I have never once, ever heard a single Republican across the aisle stand up and say they supported women's reproductive rights and freedoms. As a matter of fact, it was quite the opposite. So if you hear them out there now sort of shifting sideways because of the flack that the courts have taken over the decision, Dobbs' decision, and you think that maybe they're going to be a little bit nicer, don't let them fool you. Don't buy it. They get back into that General Assembly, and if they get that supermajority, they are going to restrict it, period. No questions asked, flat out. Your reproductive rights are gone in the state of North Carolina if you let that happen. So I caution you, don't buy that. Okay, now I think Vicki mentioned the courts. That is extremely important. When I first entered the General Assembly, essentially we had nonpartisan elections for the judges from top to bottom. And the Republicans systematically changed that in the state to now we have partisan election of our judiciary as well, from top to bottom, although. And they are determined to put folks into those courts who think like the most extreme versions of the Republicans do, so that when they pass this off-the-wall legislation, they know that they can have it upheld if it ever makes its way to the courts. And so that would be a travesty. So you need to make sure you vote, support those Democratic judges, support those Democratic legislatures, and support me for U.S. House of Representatives. Now, I've talked a little bit about my upbringing, my professional history. You know, I think I mentioned that I work for a defense entity, been there for a contractor, been there for 19 years now, an IT professional, served in the military for 20 years, done a variety of things. And I would easily stack my professional experience up against someone who's had the opportunity to serve as a politician's helper and a politician. That's about it. A politician's helper first, and then a politician. So I think we want somebody who's actually worked out there in the real world doing real type jobs, just like you all have, as opposed to only doing politics their entire life. So as far as my priorities go, should I be elected to serve in the Congress? For me, it's all about families, all about families. As families, they are the backbone of this nation, and when families are thriving, the nation thrives. When families are strong, the nation's strong. So our campaign is about standing up for a family first agenda. Now, towards that end, we need more people working, good jobs, good wages. We need to ensure that our families have the supports they need, the child care, family care, the health care. We need to strengthen our system of public education, and we absolutely must make sure that the environment that our kids and families live, work, and play in is safe. Those things we just absolutely have to do. So if elected and sent to Congress, I'll go forth with the 6-point, what I call a 6-point family first agenda. 1, establish $15 per hour minimum living wage. I fervently believe that if you have a family of 4 with 2 working adults earning minimum wage, they ought to be able to earn enough such that they do not have to rely on government assistance, and that wage ought to be indexed, protected against the ravages of inflation. Consider, we had a lot of kids graduate from high school this year. When they entered kindergarten some 12, 13 years ago, whatever, the minimum wage was the same then as it is today. And something's wrong with that picture. Something's wrong with that picture. We need to make sure that our kids have a solid education. So that's something that's dear to my heart, but I think we need to go back and probably put a significant emphasis on what happens in kindergarten through 3rd grade. We have too many kids graduating out of 3rd grade, not reading at grade level, not doing math at grade level. And if you're not learning to do that at that point in your academic careers, you're going to have a struggle for the rest of it. You need to get that solid, firm foundation set in order to be successful. 3, we're going to provide support for small businesses. And I'm talking about those businesses with 20 or fewer folks, because they put the butter on the bread and the food on the table for a lot of folks in our state. So we need to make sure that we're not overburdening them with regulations, make it easier for them to start these businesses and keep their folks employed and thriving economically. Also, we need to care for our environment. Absolutely. Folks want clean water, clean air. They don't want to live in polluted environments. And unfortunately, that's too often for those at the lower end of the economic spectrum in our community. So we need to put a stop to that. We need to strengthen our democracy and the military forces that sustain it. Now, let's talk about this democracy issue right quickly. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, but I truly believe that democracy that we have as we know it today is under threat, under assault. If you saw the videos, images of January 16, raise your hand for me, please. You saw that, okay. Now, I saw it too. And the thing that mystifies me is that there are people out there trying to tell me that what I saw is not what I saw. I mean, like, come on, man. People with sticks, canes, bear spray, bludgeoning our policemen, hanging from the rafters in the doggone Capitol building. You want to tell me that was just peaceful political discourse? And that it was, get real. Get real. And then the gentleman who wants to be your congressman now said he felt that it was his solemn duty, solemn obligation to vote to overturn the election. On what basis? On what basis was it his solemn obligation? What about upholding the Constitution? They did not detect any significant fraud throughout the country. I mean, it was tried in the courts, many of them populated by Trump appointees. They said, no, get out of here. But yet he felt it was his solemn obligation to vote to overturn the election of our president. He's a doggone insurrectionist. I don't think we want to put an insurrectionist in the office to represent the citizens of Congressional District 9. Especially since he decided he just parachute in and buy a home in Pinehurst and maybe call himself a resident of the district. But, there's a distinction between the folks of the lower Piedmont and the Sandhills, which comprise Congressional District 9, and the folks in excerpts of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. So we have a different sentiment out here. Yeah, and we believe that being a patriot is about serving your country, not serving somebody who comes up with a bunch of wacky ideas and protestations about what's going on and distorting reality, but living in a world where real is what we see with our eyes and experience and what we know to be true, not what we want to make up and try to fool others, because we're not being fooled here. So, and also I just want to encourage you, like I said, to get out and vote. Don't buy into this notion that because it's a midterm that you guys are going to stay home, or people are going to stay home, therefore you'll stay home and not vote. Remember, that's what happened in 2010. That's what happened in 2010. And we saw the disastrous effect that it has had on this state. Many are concerned about the state of education and the funding levels of education in the state of North Carolina. Well, you can trace the lack thereof back to 2010. Some are concerned about this war on women that I perceive to be resulting from this, Dobbs decision in the state of North Carolina. But you can still trace its origins back to 2010. So a lot of the problems that we perceive as Democrats and the lack of proper solutions for the things that we face on a daily basis, we can trace it back to 2010 when we didn't show up and vote. So I know what some of you may be telling me, well, I voted. And maybe you did. But what about your friends? What about your other family members? What about your neighbors? So sometimes people say, well, Ben, what can we do to help? But that's what you can do. Not only vote yourself, but make sure the rest of the folks in your house, your communities, your neighbors, pick up the phone if you have to, wherever they're at. I don't care. Make sure they understand that this is a critical juncture in our life. And like I said, I know a lot of times you say, oh, well, politicians always say that this is most important election, but you saw January 6th for yourself. You saw a sitting president who was determined that he was not going to leave the White House. I mean, he had made up his mind that he wasn't going to leave. If there was any way possible by any chicanery whatsoever, it was not his, and he knew he lost the election. But his own folks, some of them said, well, hey, just say you won it. They said it was fraud. Remember, he was setting the stage even before the election took place. If I don't win, it's fraud. If I don't win, it's fraud. If I don't win, it's fraud. Then he called various state legislatures, leaders, and told them, overthrow the election, just wipe it out. And if you think that was the end of it, think again. The US Supreme Court is hearing a case as we speak. Moore v. Harper, I believe is the name of it. And there is this theory out there called independent state legislation theory. And in essence, what they want to do is they want to say, okay, well, really, the courts have no say-so over our redistricting efforts and over our conduct of elections related to federal elections. And therefore, we should be able to do what we want without any interference from the courts. Can you imagine the peril that we would be in if the US Supreme Court said, you're right, we think you got a point about this independent state legislature thing. And you know the scary thing about it, it's not too far-fetched to believe that that court might actually agree. You know how stacked that court is now. So what if they side with Moore v. Harper? Can you imagine if that was already the case during the 2020 presidential election, where the legislatures felt that they were constitutionally allowed to just overthrow the popular vote within their states? Well, they're trying to set it up, they, the Republicans, so that they can do it the next time. So you need to go vote, because if by chance, and I pray to God that it doesn't happen, but that authority is returned to the legislatures to do that, you better make sure that it's not dominated by a bunch of Republican election deniers. I mean, they've already told you what they're going to do. They're already denying the validity of election as it is, the last presidential election. So they're trying to put these structures and the people in place, essentially to throw it out next time if it doesn't turn out the way they want it to turn out. But I'm sorry, I'm carrying on too long. You have questions, it's time to take questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
I guess I just hold on to it.
Now, the Supreme Court currently has made a number of decisions which I think have nothing to do with the Constitution as we know it. And another one of those decisions it deals with the separation of church and state. Now, I know the separation of church and state isn't actually in the Constitution, but we have all gone along with the idea, not all of us have gone along, but it is a tradition that church and state be separate. And yet the Supreme Court made a decision that a football coach could have his players pray with him at the conclusion of a game on the middle line or something. And the court decided, well, there wasn't anything wrong with that, because if the kids didn't want to join him, they didn't have to. Well, that would mean that the kids didn't want to be on the team either if they decided not to go pray with the coach. So how do you feel about this issue of separation of church and state?
Well, in that particular case, I think the courts were wrong again. And we all understand the concept of peer pressure. So you're on the football team, basketball court or whatever, and you have a coach praying, and what are you going to do? Just stand around and say, well, I'm not going to do that. We know how that works. So, and another point on that is the coach now is going around saying that he couldn't get his job back because of those actions, which is not true. They offered him back, but he decided not to go back. He's on the circuit now, of course, earning healthy purses, running around the country telling folks that he was not allowed to go back to work because he took the stand, which is couldn't be further from the truth. But I do believe that we need to be careful and keep the separation of church and state intact. And I think right now it seems like we're in a situation where there's some religions per se or leaders are trying to make it so that we don't have that clear separation that we've had in the recent past. We do not want a theocracy. I'm a Christian man, and I have no problem with my faith or anybody else's Christian faith. But I don't want the state dictating to me how I'm to worship and serve in my faith. I just don't believe that that is proper. Someone back there, I think it's Vicky.
I wanted to raise the issue of education because you said, and I agree, that it's important for early learners to master reading and begin to write and understand math. But that's also the ostensible platform of a lot of the right-wing people who are starting to try to infiltrate the school boards. And when they say reading, writing, and math, what they're also either saying or not saying is, and no history and no science. And we heard that here in the last meeting when we heard some of the Board of Education candidates. So I'm thinking that you're not in favor of no history and no science, but could you speak to that?
And I was talking to a group earlier, and you go to the website and it talks about all the things I've done throughout my career. And one of them was as a science teacher. Okay, now I didn't teach for long. It was an intermediate period between exiting the Air Force and eventually going back into the private industry, working for the defense contractor. But I did teach science for a year. And as a matter of fact, I actually taught a couple more years, but on a virtual platform. It was called at the time the Cumberland County Virtual School, which was a predecessor to the North Carolina Public Virtual School. And on that platform, I taught earth science and honors astronomy. But the idea that we're not going to teach science in the early years is just crazy. I don't know where it came from with that one. But I know probably what they do restrict. They don't mind you learning math, and they don't mind you learning to read. But what they're trying to do is engage in the culture wars. They want you to believe that in the first grade, they're being taught critical race theory, and they're being taught to become a transgender and stuff like that. I don't know. They're just trying to get people upset, fired up, and mad about what they are claiming kids are receiving in schools, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So that's probably why the lieutenant governor came up with this notion that we shouldn't teach any math and social studies, which is absolutely ridiculous. We need to teach history. We need to teach math. We need to teach science. We need to have our kids grounded in all of those things. Yeah, and one of probably a teacher. She just reminded us, and when you, in social studies, that's where you learn civics. You know about how your governments operate, how your societies operate, and things of that nature. So we certainly want to do that. I would think we want to do that. Yes, ma'am.
I was glad to hear you say that the environment is part of your plan, because I think about Jackson, Mississippi, and what they've gone through with their water. God forbid that we should ever have to have that in our state. But also I'm concerned about the hog farms down in the eastern part of the state that is polluting our air, and the people that live around that. I feel compassion for them.
Yes, and I do too. As a matter of fact, think it was about 3 months ago, some of my peers and I, we visited one of those hog farms down there. I believe it was in Sampson County. And of course, we'd like to see more stringent regulations, but because of course we have a Republican-dominated legislature, we can only get so much out of them. But we were able to make some small improvements, but we need to go much, much further, much further. And that again goes back to why it's very important that you vote for those Democrats up and down the ballot, because in the best of all worlds, we take the majority, but to be quite frank, that's not likely based on the way the districts have been drawn this time. But we absolutely must not allow them to have a supermajority. And if that were the case, I could guarantee you that we would probably not make any more improvements to those circumstances down there. And those communities tend to be, like I said, the poorer communities in the state. And it seems like we have a situation where oftentimes it's the poor that suffers the most, because they seem to have less ability to fight against those economic forces that cause those big polluting firms to locate in their areas.
I'm just curious to know if this District 9 was drawn to favor Democrats or Republicans.
Okay, let me give you my take on this situation. I was on the redistricting committee. As a matter of fact, I was the lead in the North Carolina Senate Democrats, among the North Carolina Senate Democrats for doing the districts. For those of you who may have been following that action, you may have heard about this Clark 7-7 map, which is the most balanced and the most perfect map that was put forth for congressional districts for the state of North Carolina. And yes, I'm taking credit for it. But it was neither a partisan gerrymander, it wasn't a Democratic gerrymander, it wasn't a Republican gerrymander. It respected the regions within the state. You had the mountain regions, the Piedmont regions, the Sandhills regions, the coastal regions, the northeastern regions. Every major geographical region had a congressional district embedded within it. That was the map that I came up with, and it would have at least 2, if not 3, highly competitive districts in which a Democrat or Republican could have won. Now, the Republicans, on the other hand, of course, they put out their Republican gerrymanders again and again, and the court struck them down. So ultimately, the court decided to draw the map and through a special master. This is me personally. I consider that a bipartisan gerrymander or nonpartisan gerrymander. So it'll elect essentially 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans for sure, and actually more likely, well, if you believe the pundits and those who study this thing, they say it'll elect 7 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and have 1 toss-up. That toss-up being Congressional District 13. But as you know, I'm running in 9, and I believe we can win it, although the political pundits might think otherwise, some of them. So, but I do not perceive this map as having the regional representation of the one that I recommended. But we can't always get our way. Because like I said, there was a pure Sandhills map, a pure mountain map, a pure Piedmont map, a pure Wake County area map, one for the northeast, southeast. It would have been highly competitive. So it didn't favor any party at the end of the day. So Congressional District 9 is a lean, for sure, a red leaning district. If you overlay the Trump elections on that district, Trump beat Biden by about 6 percentage points. But if you look at Governor Cooper's performance, he fell only about 2,000 votes shy in that area of force. I had to think run, force, run. Only about 2,000 votes shorter force. So I perceive it to be more competitive than some think it is. And so I believe really at the end of the day, if Democrats get out, there's a large reservoir of Democrats within that Congressional District 9. If they get out and vote, we can win that district. And of the 9 counties in that district,
I'm sure everybody heard me.
and plus I'll be repeating.
I do not have a
anyway.
soft voice.
Of the 9 counties in Congressional District 9, Randolph is ruby red. Chatham is blue. Moore County, red. Lee County, red, but it has gone blue. I think it was in 2008, but red. We have 3 precincts in Harnett and a piece of one, the western precincts, red. You have northwestern Cumberland County, all blue. You have Hope County, blue. You have Scotland County, blue tenant. And you have the 2 precincts and a piece in eastern Richmond County, they're blue. So you look at it overall, like I say, if you look at the performance of Trump versus Biden, it has a red lean to it for sure. But like I said, if you look at Cooper's performance in there, it looks more very light pink, very light pink. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. One subject I haven't touched on is public education. For the last 50 years that I remember, the Republican Party wants to get rid of public education. And this whole thing with vouchers, I think is absurd. I think they should be eliminated. If you want to send your child to a private school, that's fine, you pay for it. But I don't want to pay for someone else to send their child to a private school. I think all the money should go towards public education.
In the state of North Carolina, I can't speak to the other states, the state court ruled that the Opportunity Scholarship Program was consistent with the Constitution. Now, me, the larger problem is really not the Opportunity Scholarship Grant Program, because if you look at the overall spending on education in the state of North Carolina, that's peanuts. But we need to spend more of our general funds supporting public education in the state of North Carolina. There was a case called the Leandro case that I think it was about 20, 30 years ago now, I lost track of the time, that was initiated out of my home county, Hope County, and then Cumberland County was involved as well as some of the other counties. And they sued the state of North Carolina saying you're not upholding your legal obligation to provide a quality education for each child. And at the end of the day, the determination was made that essentially you're underfunding significantly certain populations in certain areas when it came to providing for the education. Now, recently, a judge in the state of North Carolina ruled that, ruled that the essentially told the state agencies, the appropriate agencies, that you're to provide the funding that, according to, I believe, Judge Manning, that indicated there was a certain amount of funds that should be provided for education. Excuse me if I have the judges wrong, but the story is the same anyway in terms of the funding. But the courts, he was overruled, and it was determined that the courts do not have the authority to dictate to state agencies that they are to do that. The appropriation of funds based on our Constitution remains with the North Carolina General Assembly to do their appropriating of funds. So that goes back again to what happened in 2010. The shift of power took place, and I doubt very seriously that this legislature, as long as it's in the control of the Republicans, will fund education up to the levels required by the Leandro decisions. I could be proven wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong. But you all can do something about that. And then I know I keep saying it goes to voting, and it does, but unfortunately, I do understand a lot of the seats have been gerrymandered. So capturing the majority is probably not likely this time around, but make sure that they don't get that supermajority back, because as they have proven in the past and will do so again, they will do any and everything they're big and bad enough to. So at least by keeping them from getting the supermajority and having a Democratic governor, we have the ability to sustain his vetoes and therefore put him in the position to stop the bad legislation and to be able to negotiate for a better deal for our public education in the state of North Carolina. Yes, ma'am.
We're all very focused and concerned about what's happening in our state, of course, and you've been front seat in that for a while. But when you get to Washington, which you will, then we want to know, I guess I want to know, at that scale, knowing the colleagues you will have to work with there, for this little group of people, you're going to be the new David Price, and we all love.
Yeah.
Do you think there is anything that the House or the Senate, or God forbid, we actually get some bipartisan efforts, can do about the laws or the process that affects things like gerrymandering and Citizens United to get us back to actually having a democracy that we all recognize? I'm convinced that those two situations where the politicians select their voters and not vice versa, and where money buys, the loyalty of any politician. Is there some way in Washington that we can have any hope for us?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, bills were passed to that effect out of the U.S. House of Representatives, but our two favorite senators, Democrats, stood in the way. So that being the case, we couldn't get those bills through the Senate. And even if they had supported them, in all probability, the Republicans would have implemented a filibuster, and those two same senators would not agree to modify the filibuster in order for us to pass legislation in the country to handle those issues. So yes, it can be done. If I were in the U.S. House of Representatives, I'd certainly be one of those supporting that act. That's right, absolutely right, when I get there. So yes, I can be handled legislatively. But not just me, make sure you send Sherry Beasley and a few more Democrats to the Senate, and keep the ones that are there so that we'll at least get up to 52 and we'll be able to get that done. Get that done. We won't have to rely on two who are not on board with us.
Any other questions? So, yes, when he goes to Washington, I think that's what we have to keep in mind. It would be very helpful if every person here took one person with them to vote, and not your spouse, but your neighbor or somebody down the street. I mean, every little bit helps. And I know a lot of us are working on little bits of things. I wanted to say that we do have some extra handouts, particularly the ticket. So there's some on the chairs, and take them, but also you want to take some back to your friends and neighbors, you're welcome to do that. As you know, we also have a very active ballot voting location greeting program. Unless you do it, there are going to be people there offering a sample ballot, but take as many as you want. And if we run out, let the club know and we'll get you. So this was exciting. I think we have a real chance to get a Democratic congressperson again. So let's give him all the support we can and thank him for being here tonight.
Well, when the courts pass, that city, a lot of cities, that's tremendous. Well, I was surprised they were willing to do it. I was supposed to be on board for that.